Hi, this is TruthQuest. I'm your host, Bryan.
And I'm Mary Claire.
We're excited to be with you for another scintillating episode of TruthQuest.
Woo!
Mary Claire, tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Oh, we're going to talk about the New England Patriots. I'm a Packers fan. Bryan, you're a Lions fan, so I'm sure we have different feelings about Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. We're going to go back a couple decades. When the Patriots were dominating, they had 6 Super Bowl wins, 9 appearances in the Super Bowl, in the dynamic duo of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. So if anybody remembers, the Patriots have a couple scandals, so to speak. I'm not sure if they consider them scandals, but we've got Spygate back in 2007 and Deflategate back in 2015. And we're going to explore this today. We're going to explore what if technology like ICANN was present? How would that have changed the investigation? Would that have changed the outcome at all? And really explore, again, now that we are where we are today, what more can we learn, or what can we learn from the scandals of the past, so to speak? What would you add to that, Bryan?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. We can start with another story, and many of our listeners may have heard of this, but if you go back, well, about 30 years ago, the British cycling team was really, really bad. And they tried everything that they could to get that turned around. And eventually they hired a person named Sir David Brailsford, who came in and really started to preach the benefits of the aggregation of marginal returns.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for a tenth of a second in everything, right? And in some ways, this goes back to our spot fixing episode a couple of episodes ago, where we were talking about what happens when it might not be a huge cheating thing. It might not be a big thing. It might just be a small thing. But in that small thing, that there are big outcomes and there are value in those small things. And one of the interesting things here is, at one level, you might be like, well, what's so important about a deflated ball? I mean, it can't be that big of an advantage. You still got to throw it. You still got to catch it. You still got to block. You still got to run your routes. You still got to do your things, right? But it's just that when things are that tight in competitively and in professional sports, they certainly are.
Yep.
I mean, you're down to really the aggregation of very, very, very marginal gains. And Sir David Brailsford kept talking about tenths of a second. You're like, let's get a tenth of a second here and a tenth of a second there.
It was the 1% gain, I believe. He was always trying to find a 1% gain no matter where they looked.
Wherever they looked, right? And I think many of these may have been much, much smaller than 1%. But the interesting point is that they were very successful. I mean, from 2004 till 2015 or so, the Olympics there, Britain cyclists, they dominated the sport. And so the outcomes are very real. And so, it's not something that you can kind of, turn the other way and not pay attention to, because the gains do matter. And if you talk with a lot of people, especially the Indianapolis Colts, who were on the other end of that 45-7 beat down, they're like, well, this mattered a lot. And by the way, it was when that would have made the biggest difference, right? It was raining, it was cold.
Yeah.
Lower inflated balls mean that you can throw them more easily and you can catch them more easily. So I do think it is interesting to ask the question, what if the Patriots had never gotten caught? And even then, the catching of the Patriots was very unsatisfactory because nobody ever admitted it.
No.
In fact, I think that as part of this, Tom Brady wouldn't even let them take his phone. I'm sure there was incriminating, evidence on it. But
I think when we think about those incremental gains in a highly competitive environment where little things make the difference, the gray area becomes very big, I presume. And what's 12.4 versus 12.5%? That one seems pretty, I mean, there's some clear rules on it.
Yeah.
But I could see how, again, assuming the best in people, and I'm for better or worse, presuming the best, if the rules aren't clear, then those incremental gains could turn into something bigger. I don't know. You're going to see the truth however you want to see it. Humans often respond that way. The Deflategate one is pretty hard pressed to believe. There was a hard and fast rule on that one.
Yeah.
We get back to the Michigan sign stealing. and spot fixing for that matter, there are hard and fast rules. But I wonder, as an individual, do you see gray where there's actually black and white when you're in
Right.
that competitive a situation? Where in that case, can a technology, if the right incentives are in place or disincentives are in place, does that help us be our best selves, so to speak?
Right.
Yeah. So
It's interesting how these things kind of bubble up, and then they often never get completely resolved either. So
in any one of these cases, I feel
right,
like that we've talked about.
right. There's still stuff left hanging out there, like
Yeah.
in the sign stealing. What did Harbaugh know? Right.
Yep.
Spot fixing. It's like, what does anybody else know? Who else is involved? And now, when we come to this situation, who else was engaged in this or knew about it?
Yep.
So let's set the stage. So in 2007, the Patriots were caught in what became known as Spygate. They were filming the New York Jets coach's defensive signals from a location the NFL said was off limits. And I think everybody agrees you had to know that this was off limits. It wasn't, the Patriots couldn't say, well, we didn't know.
Yeah.
They knew they were cheating, right? So let's be clear, filming signals isn't unusual in the NFL. Plenty of teams did it, but the way the Patriots did it broke the league rules. And so the fallout of that was that head coach Bill Belichick was fined $500,000, which was the largest fine ever for a coach. The team itself got hit with a $250,000 fine and lost a first-round draft pick, which that's huge. The $250,000 probably nobody cared about.
Agreed.
But the first-round draft pick, that was a big deal. And suddenly, the Patriots' dominance got this label of cheaters. So now we fast forward 215, we get Deflategate. And this one really captured the headlines beyond sports because the accusation was that Tom Brady had ordered footballs to be deflated below the legal pressure during the AFC Championship game. Now, the science was messy and the evidence circumstantial, but the NFL cracked down anyway. So Brady was suspended 4 games. The team fined another $1 million and more draft picks stripped away. I think it was 2 second-round draft picks. And then from then on, every Patriot accomplishment was filtered through those scandals. So to many fans, it wasn't just about talent and preparation. It was about cheating. And that's interesting because, the Patriots have been held up as this model franchise for a very long time about doing things the right way and making sure that things happened in the right way. So this is an interesting change in direction.
So if we, again, circling back to either one of those, if a technology like ICANNOS had been present, what would have looked different? Or how could it have been used? In many cases, as we've talked about, it feels like an understanding of who knew what. In any one of these cases we talked about, it's often a question of who knew what. And that leaves it messy at the end. Even if a verdict, not even a verdict, but even if consequences are held out, a verdict rarely is named, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And so can leveraging technology allow us to come to an actual verdict and to truth rather than murkiness? I think.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting if you could have a way to ask a question of maybe not everybody, but certainly people who have an ability to influence certain aspects of a game, whether or not there have been any intentional efforts to break the rules, right? So, I mean, if you ask that question just straight up, like of all the quarterbacks have to answer that question. Have you done anything, in this last year that would be an intentional breaking of the rules? Because it's not just this is the one that becomes obvious, but how many of these actually never get caught?
I think that's the bigger question.
That's the bigger question, right? So you think about opportunities to actually have that discussion and take that test where you can be like, well, was there ever anything that you did in the last year that you intentionally broke any of the rules? There's also an interesting alternative. The opposite side of this would it be interesting for Tom Brady, assuming he's innocent, to take a test to prove that? Right?
Yeah.
Because you got Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, who now there's always the but. It's not Sosa. Who was the dude who was hitting all the home runs that was juicing? I mean, McGuire and Sosa certainly were, but so was there was. There's
a guy for the Brewers for a while.
Yeah,
I forget his name.
The interesting part about that is that even there you could ask that question: have you used any performance-enhancing drugs, right, over the last year? Again, rather than waiting for them to try to find it in your system, we could just ask that question straight up.
I think that's an area that can get gray too. It's yeah, and maybe it's not gray in the rule books, but it feels like people are. I mean, they're paid they're paid to use their brains and their bodies in the most optimal manner, ideally. Yeah. So how can I keep getting that edge, that increasing marginal gains from little decisions here and there? I am sure people have gotten caught that didn't realize they were doing something wrong. And then there were people that knew exactly what they were doing. But that performance enhancing drug, at what point is it not? Maybe I'm sure it's listed somewhere, but that's another one that I feel like could get gray.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, because those marginal gains matter, we know that this happens in all kinds of places. So, pushing the rules, breaking the rules, how far can you go? So baseball, sign stealing, spot fixing, we know that sign stealing was an open secret for decades until the Astros sort of made that explode, right?
Yeah. Yep.
NASCAR mechanics are practically rewarded for finding loopholes. So anything they can do to figure out how to get that just tiniest little bit of an edge.
That's actually one of the best examples.
Yeah. And then in the NBA, I love this load management, right? Just a basically illegal form of cheating the fans. I mean, if you really sat down like, oh, Kawhi Leonard is injured, I'd love to take a test there. Is he really injured? What is this really? Is he sick? Was he really sick?
Yeah.
That just feels like a lot of BS right there.
I didn't appreciate that till a couple seasons ago. My husband explained it to me in more depth. Because maybe it was Kawhi Leonard. I can't remember who it was, but there was a question. I think it was Kawhi Leonard, in fact. There was a question on whether or not he was or he wasn't hurt or sick, or I don't think it was LeBron James, but it was in the playoffs, I believe, or in prep for the playoffs. So yeah, again, gray. So how do we, if we as humans are incentivized to look for the gray, how do we have the right counter measures to keep us in the white, so to speak?
Yeah. I know if I'm buying tickets, I'd like to know, right? I don't want to spend that kind of money to show up and not have the star be playing.
Yep. That's well said.
A challenge. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. So, I mean, the truth is that history loves winners. Nobody remembers the losers. Whatever edge you can get matters in terms of these aggregation and marginal returns. So there needs to be a way to make sure that this playing field stays level. But by the way, we've spent millions of dollars and so much time and energy trying to do that, right? Drug testing and conversations and all these different things that it seems like if we get the right technology in there, which certainly exists, that we could do something different.
I know a company. They're called I Can Know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the trust behind this. So, to your point, the shades of gray, is bending a rule the same as breaking it? Where's the loophole creative strategy versus dishonesty? And what makes scandals like Spygate and Deflategate, what makes those stick? I think that once trust is broken and people feel deceived, that's really the challenge.
Well, we deal with that on the personal basis daily with customers, right?
Yeah.
And it's leveraging our technology to try to get to the truth and get to a place of trust again, if possible. So,
I mean, you can imagine a place where, let's say the NFL had a transparent truth protocol, so players and coaches could be tested to confirm or deny accusations. Would we trust the outcomes more? Would we accept that sometimes accusations are just noise? You can bring this to the broader political situation right now, and I don't want to take any sides. That would be dangerous to do at this point in time. But the truth is that none of us on any side of this political spectrum are believing anybody else's truth, right? I mean, right now it's only our truth and no one else's truth, and we're creating our whole worlds out of whole cloth on both sides of the aisle that aren't really rooted in realities, or they're rooted in some realities and not in others, right?
Yeah.
So it's super hard to, at this point, really understand kind of what you can do to change this or move this in a different direction.
Well, in a less political realms and more, I don't know if there's a lot of money wrapped up in sports and fan base trust or fan trust, if you will. To me, there's greater opportunity for this black and white potentially. Well, there's a different level of need. We have a real need in some parts of our world. Just the amount of money that's wrapped up in it. You'd think you'd want to have the right incentives in place to promote correct decision making, because every dollar is so valuable, and every decision can be so valuable from a financial standpoint. So it's kind of surprising. We know phishing has lie detection built into its rules.
That's
Why
right.
it is not built into, which has like a small percentage of the amount of money flowing through that than other professional sports. You'd think there'd be some form of countermeasure locked in here, but players' unions and such would probably, on which side of it, I'm not sure. The player union side or the league side is not incentivized. You'd think they'd be incentivized, potentially not incentivized, to put in some sort of lie detection measure.
No, totally agree.
So,
and there's a real cost long term with this too, because no matter what Brady or Belichick does going forward, there's always going to be this asterisk, right?
Yep.
It's like, did they cheat their way there? These great performances, and you're like, well, is that real or was that fake? And once the doubt is there, it's super hard to recover that, right? And it's I think more and more athletes and athletic organizations need to think about how they play the game as much as do they just win the game. So, it's whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's life, once you've lost your trust with people, it's just hard to get back. And maybe something like I Can Know is something that helps recover that truth, but hopefully establish it in the first place.
That's I think, agreed. It can be used as a preventative measure as opposed to ideally a restorative measure too, but avoid the near occasion, if you will, as opposed to try to fix it on the back end. So,
yeah. Well, this has been great, Mary Claire. Thanks for joining today. This has been fun, and we're going to continue this series. So we'll be looking for the next opportunity to uncover areas that cheating has happened or scandals have happened that we might have learned more had we been able to find the truth up front.
Game on. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. And if you're curious about truth and trust in your own life, check out I Can Know. Private investigators, companies, organizations, governments all use it to get to the truth. And if you like this podcast and want more of the same, you can find us on YouTube or Spotify. And we appreciate, obviously, any recommendations to other listeners. So until next time.